The best investment I ever made destroyed my life. Both of those statements are true. I know that sounds impossible, but when you're 69 years old and you've lost $820,000 to a woman 43 years younger than you start understanding that two completely opposite things can exist at the same time. The land was perfect, the location was perfect, the deal was perfect, and it was all a lie. I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me. I don't want your pity. I had a good run. I built a construction company in Perth from absolutely nothing and sold it for enough money that I never had to work again. I've got 3 kids who are doing well. I've got grandkids. I've got a life most men would envy. Or I had one anyway. Before I met Kulap. Before Udon Thani. Before I learned that being smart in business doesn't mean a damn thing when you're lonely and someone young and beautiful tells you that you're special. People always ask me how it starts. Like there's some magic moment when you suddenly become stupid. There isn't. It's gradual. It's a series of small decisions that seem perfectly reasonable at the time. You tell yourself you're different from those other guys, the ones who get taken advantage of. You tell yourself you're too smart for that. You've built a business. You've negotiated million-dollar contracts. You understand people. You understand leverage. You understand risk. And that confidence, that absolute certainty that you know what you're doing, that's what kills you in the end. I first went to Thailand in 2019. I'd been divorced for 6 years by then. My ex-wife got the house in Cottesloe and half of everything else, which was fair enough. We'd been married for 32 years and she'd put up with a lot. The business consumed me. I was never home. When I finally sold up and retired, she told me she didn't know who I was anymore without the company. She was right. I didn't know who I was either. So when my mate Greg suggested we do a trip to Thailand, just 2 old blokes having a bit of fun, I thought, why not? We landed in Bangkok, and I hated it immediately. Too hot, too crowded, too chaotic. I'm not a city person. I grew up on building sites. I like space. I like quiet. But Greg had a friend in Pattaya who ran a bar, so we went there next, and I hated that even more. It felt like a circus. Every second building was a go-go bar or a massage place. And yeah, I know what kind of massage place. It wasn't for me. I told Greg I was going to head home early. I'd given Thailand a go and it wasn't my scene. Then Greg's friend said we should go up to Isan before I left. He said that's the real Thailand, not the tourist garbage. He said if I wanted to see what the country was actually like, I needed to get out of the cities. So we rented a car and drove to Udon Thani. I remember the drive. Flat countryside, rice paddies, little villages with wooden houses on stilts. It reminded me of rural Western Australia in a strange way. Open, honest, real. We stopped at a small restaurant on the side of the road because Greg needed to use the toilet. I was sitting there drinking a warm Coke because they didn't have cold ones, and this woman came over to take my order. I speak a bit of Thai. Not much. Just the basics I'd picked up over the previous 2 weeks. But when I tried to order in Thai, she smiled. And when I say smiled, I mean really smiled. Not the professional smile you get from bar girls in Pattaya. A genuine smile. Like she was surprised and pleased that some old Farang had made the effort. Her name was Kulap. She was 26 years old. She'd grown up in a village about 30 kilometers away, and she was working at her aunt's restaurant to save money. She told me all this in broken English while I sat there like an idiot, just completely captivated. She wasn't beautiful in the way you see in magazines. She was tiny, maybe 5 foot tall, with a round face and short hair. But there was something about her, an energy, a warmth. When she talked, she used her whole body. Her hands, her expressions, everything. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone be that present with you. I went back to that restaurant every day for the next week. Greg thought I'd lost my mind. He wanted to go back to Pattaya, but I told him to go without me. I said I'd meet him in Bangkok before our flight home. He looked at me like I was insane, and maybe I was. But sitting in that restaurant, talking to Kulap during her breaks, watching her serve other customers, laughing at my terrible attempts to speak Thai, it felt like something had woken up inside me that had been asleep for a very long time. On my last day, I asked her if she'd have dinner with me. Somewhere nice, not the restaurant. She hesitated, and I thought I'd overstepped. But then she said yes. We went to a place in town, nothing fancy, just a regular Thai restaurant with plastic chairs and fluorescent lights. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her family. Her father had died when she was 16. Her mother was getting old and couldn't work the rice farm anymore. She had 2 brothers and a sister, all younger, all needing help in different ways. She'd been sending money home from the restaurant for 10 years, trying to give them the chances she never had. I told her about my life too. The business, the divorce, my kids. How I felt like I'd spent 40 years building something, and when I finally stopped, I realized I didn't know what any of it had been for. She listened like what I was saying actually mattered. Not the way people listen at parties where they're just waiting for their turn to talk. Really listened. And when I got emotional, which I did because I'm not good at talking about feelings, she reached across the table and held my hand. Just held it, didn't say anything. Just sat there with me while I pulled myself together. I flew back to Australia knowing I was going to return to Thailand, to Udon Thani, to her. I didn't tell my kids. I didn't tell anyone except Greg, and even then I made it sound casual. Like I was just going back to explore the region more. But I knew. I absolutely knew that something significant had happened in that restaurant. I returned 3 months later, January 2020. I'd been messaging Kulap every day online, just little things. Good morning, how was your day? Photos of Perth. She'd send me photos back. Her at the restaurant, her family's rice fields, her mother's house. I started learning more Thai using an app because I wanted to be able to have proper conversations with her. I practiced every day. I was obsessed with getting it right. When I arrived in Udon Thani, she met me at the bus station. I'd flown into Bangkok and then taken an overnight bus north because I wanted to save money. That sounds stupid now, a millionaire taking a bus to save a few dollars. But I think part of me wanted to prove I wasn't one of those flashy farangs who throws money around. I wanted her to see I was practical, grounded, not some rich idiot. She took me to a guest house she'd arranged. Nothing fancy. Clean room, decent bed, air conditioning that worked most of the time. I stayed for 2 weeks that trip. Every evening after her shift at the restaurant, we'd go for drives on her motorbike. She'd take me to temples, to night markets, to her village. I met her mother, her brothers, her sister. They were lovely people. Poor, obviously. The mother's house was wooden, raised on concrete posts, with a corrugated iron roof. But it was clean and they were welcoming and they fed me even though I could tell they didn't have much. Kulap's brother Samchai was particularly friendly. He was 32, a big guy who worked construction in Udon Thani. He spoke better English than Kulup, and he'd sit with me for hours, asking about Australia, about my business, about construction techniques. I liked him. He seemed ambitious, smart. He told me he wanted to start his own construction business one day, but he didn't have the capital. I told him that's how I'd started too. Just me and a truck and a willingness to work 18-hour days. Looking back, I can see what was happening. But at the time, it just felt like I was being accepted into a family, into a community. I'd go to the village and people would wave at me. Kids would run up and practice their English. Old women would offer me food. It felt real. It felt like I'd found something in Thailand that I'd been missing in Australia for years. Connection. Purpose. A place where I mattered not because of what I'd achieved, but because of who I was as a person. Before I left, Kulap told me she loved me. We were sitting by the reservoir at dusk, watching the sun go down, and she just said it, in Thai, first Pomrak Kun, and then in English. I love you. I didn't say it back immediately. I wanted to make sure I meant it. I wanted to make sure this wasn't just some old man's fantasy. But then I looked at her, at this woman who'd shown me nothing but kindness and patience and genuine affection, and I realized I did love her, or at least I loved how I felt when I was with her. Maybe those are the same thing. Maybe they're not. I don't know anymore. I said it back. I love you too. And I meant it. I absolutely meant it. I returned to Australia and immediately started planning to move to Thailand permanently. Not permanently. I wasn't planning to give up my Australian citizenship or anything dramatic like that. but I wanted to spend most of my time there, with her family, building something new in a place where the pace of life made sense to me. My kids thought I'd lost my mind. My daughter actually staged an intervention, sat me down with my sons and told me I was being manipulated, that Kulap was obviously after my money, that Thai women do this to old Western men all the time. I got angry. I told them they were being racist and judgmental, that they didn't know her, that they hadn't seen how she lived, how hard she worked, how much she cared for her family. My youngest son said that was exactly the problem, that her caring for her family so much meant she'd do anything to help them, including using me. I didn't speak to any of them for a month after that. I was furious. Here I was, finally happy after years of being alone, and my own children were trying to sabotage it. I see now they were just worried about me. They'd seen the news stories, the documentaries, the forum posts about Western men getting scammed in Southeast Asia. They were trying to protect me. But I didn't want protection. I wanted to live. I wanted to feel something other than the quiet desperation I'd been feeling since the divorce. I moved to Udon Thani in April 2020, right as COVID was getting serious. The timing was terrible, but I didn't care. I rented a small house in town, close to Kulap's restaurant. I got a year-long visa based on retirement. I bought a truck. I started learning Thai properly, taking lessons 3 times a week. I integrated myself into the community. I'd go to the temple on important days. I'd help Somchai with construction jobs, giving him advice, sometimes lending him tools I'd bought. I was useful. I was needed. I was happy. Kulap and I weren't officially living together. Her family was traditional, and they'd made it clear that would be inappropriate unless we were married. So she stayed at her mother's house in the village and would come to my place during the day. We'd cook together, watch Thai TV, go for drives. It was simple. It was peaceful. It was everything I'd wanted. 6 months after I moved there, I asked her to marry me. We were at the same reservoir where she'd first told me she loved me. I'd bought a ring in town, nothing extravagant, just a simple gold band. I got down on one knee, which was harder than it sounds when you're 66 with bad joints, and I asked her in Thai. She cried. She said yes. Her mother cried when we told her. Her brothers and sister were thrilled. Somchai shook my hand and told me I was part of the family now. I believed him. The Sin Sod negotiation was interesting. For those who don't know, Sin Sod is the dowry payment you make to the bride's family in Thai culture. It's supposed to show you can provide for her. There's a whole system to it based on education, status, whether she's been married before, all sorts of factors. Kulap's mother asked for 300,000 baht. That's about 12,000 Australian dollars at the exchange rate then, plus the gold, which is separate, another 100,000 baht in gold jewelry. My friends back home would have told me that was a lot, that it was a red flag, but I'd done my research. For a woman from a poor rural family marrying a wealthy Farang, 400,000 baht total was actually reasonable, not cheap, but not exploitative either. And the understanding was that most of the money would come back to us after the ceremony anyway. That's how it usually works. It's more of a symbolic show than an actual transfer of wealth. We got married in February 2021 at the local temple. It was a beautiful ceremony, traditional Thai Buddhist with monks chanting, the whole village there, food for everyone. I wore a traditional Thai outfit that made me look ridiculous, but Kulap said I looked handsome, so I didn't care. The Sin Sod was displayed in a silver bowl during the ceremony, and afterward, Kulap's mother gave most of it back to us, keeping 50,000 baht for herself and distributing another 50,000 among Kulap's siblings. That left us with 300,000 baht, and the gold, exactly as expected. I was officially married to a Thai woman. I had a Thai family. I had a life in Thailand, and I was completely, blissfully happy. That happiness lasted about 4 months. The first sign that something was off came in June 2021. Somchai came to me with a business proposal. He wanted to buy land on the outskirts of Udon Thani and develop it. There was apparently a new shopping center going in nearby, and property values were going to increase. He had the construction skills, the local knowledge, the connections. What he didn't have was capital. He needed 2 million baht, About 80,000 Australian dollars. He showed me maps, plans, numbers. It looked legitimate. And the thing is, I knew land development. That's what I'd done in Australia for 40 years. Bought land, developed it, sold it at a profit. This was literally my area of expertise. The numbers Somchai was showing me were conservative, if anything. Even if the shopping center didn't happen, land that close to town was only going to increase in value. I told him I'd think about it. I wanted to talk to Kulap first. She was hesitant. She said her brother had tried business ventures before that hadn't worked out. But when I asked for details, she was vague. Said it was family stuff, complicated. I should have pushed harder there. That was the moment. That was when I should have said no, or at least done proper due diligence. But I didn't. I trusted Somchai. I trusted the family. And more than that, I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be the patriarch who helped the family succeed. It fed my ego. I gave Somchai 2 million baht in July 2021. We structured it as a loan. There was paperwork, a proper contract, everything above board, or at least it looked above board. The contract was in Thai, and I had it translated, but I realize now the translation was probably done by someone in Somchai's circle. I should have hired an independent translator in Bangkok. I should have hired a lawyer. I should have done 100 things differently, but I didn't. The land was purchased. I saw the deed. It had Somchai's name on it, which made sense because I couldn't own land in Thailand as a foreigner. The plan was that once the development was complete and we sold it, we'd split the profit 60-40, with me getting the 60%. That would give me my initial investment back plus about 30% return. Good, not great, but solid. And more importantly, it would establish Somchai's business and make me a real part of the family's economic future. For a few months, everything seemed fine. Somchai would give me updates. Surveyors had been out. Plans were being drawn up. There were some delays with permits, which was normal. I'd drive out to look at the land sometimes. It was just sitting there, empty, which was also normal for the early stages of development. You buy the land, you secure the permits, then you start building. It takes time. Then in November, Somchai came to me with another request. He needed more money. Not for the land, that was fine, but for his mother. She was sick. She needed surgery. The hospital wanted 200,000 baht up front. I'd never heard about this. When I asked Kulap, she confirmed it. Her mother had been having stomach problems for months. They'd been trying to manage it with traditional medicine, but it wasn't working. She needed to go to a proper hospital in Bangkok. I gave them the money. Of course I did. What kind of person would I be if I let my wife's mother suffer because I was worried about money? And it was only about 8,000 Australian dollars. I had that. I could afford it. The mother went to Bangkok for the surgery. Kulap went with her. They were gone for 2 weeks. When they came back, the mother looked the same as before to me. Not better, not worse, just the same. I asked Kulap how the surgery went, and she said it went well, but the mother would need time to recover. That made sense. Surgery is invasive. Recovery takes time. I was just glad she was getting proper medical care. In January 2022, exactly 1 year after our wedding, Kulap suggested we buy land of our own. Not for development, just a nice piece of land where we could build a house. A proper house, not the little place I was renting in town, somewhere in the village, near her family. She'd seen a perfect plot, 2 rai, about half an acre. Next to her brother's land, actually. The family that owned it was selling because they were moving to Bangkok. It was a good price, 1 million baht, about 40,000 Australian dollars. I should mention something here about Thai law. Foreigners can't own land in Thailand. They can own the building on the land, but not the land itself. So, any land purchase has to be in a Thai person's name, usually your wife's. This is common. Every expat in Thailand knows this. There are ways to protect yourself, usufruct agreements, long-term leases, various legal structures, but the simplest and most common way is to just put it in your wife's name and trust her. I trusted Kulap. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. She'd been nothing but loving and loyal. She'd taken care of me when I was sick with dengue fever a few months earlier. She'd integrated me into her family. We were building a life together. Of course, I'd put the land in her name. We bought the land in February 2022. 1 million baht cash. I also budgeted another 4 million baht for building the house. Somchai would do the construction work, which would save money and keep things in the family. We'd build something simple but nice. 2 bedrooms, proper bathroom, modern kitchen, solar panels because the electricity in the village was unreliable, a small garden. Nothing extravagant, just a comfortable home where we could live out our lives together. The land purchase went smoothly. I saw the title deed. Cha Note title, the best kind in Thailand. Full legal ownership. Kulap's name right there on the document. I took a photo of it. I was proud. I owned land in Thailand. Or rather, my wife owned land in Thailand. Same thing, right? Construction started in March. Somchai hired a crew. They cleared the land, poured the foundation, started on the walls. I was out there every day, supervising. I couldn't help myself. Old habits. I'd give Somchai suggestions based on my experience in Australia. Sometimes he'd take them, sometimes he wouldn't. He knew local construction better than I did. Thai methods are different from Australian methods. You have to account for different weather, different materials, different labor practices. I respected that. Money for the construction was going out steadily. 50,000 here for materials, 30,000 there for labor. Somchai would show me receipts. I'd transfer money to Kulap and she'd pay the bills. That's how we'd set it up. She was better at dealing with local suppliers. Her Thai was obviously better than mine, and it kept the finances simple. One bank account, hers, everything going in and out where we could both see it. Except I realize now I couldn't see it. Not really. The bank was in her name. The statements came to her phone. She'd show me the balance when I asked, but I wasn't actually checking the account directly. I should have insisted on joint access, or set up a separate account just for construction expenses. But I didn't, because I trusted her, because she was my wife, because we were partners. By July 2022, the house was maybe 60% complete. Walls up, roof on, windows in, still needed electrical, plumbing, finishing work. We were roughly on budget, maybe a bit over, but nothing concerning. Somchai said we'd be done by October, maybe November, accounting for the rainy season. That's when things started feeling strange. Little things. Kulap was spending more time at her mother's house. She'd say she needed to help with the rice harvest, or her sister needed watching because of some issue, always something. When she was at my place, she was on her phone more. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd say family stuff, village gossip, nothing important. She also started talking about money more, not asking for it directly, just mentioning things. Her youngest brother wanted to go to technical school but couldn't afford it. Her sister's husband had lost his job. The motorcycle needed repairs. The mother needed medication. All reasonable things. All true, probably. But it was the frequency. Every week there was something. And every week I'd give her 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 baht because that's what you do for family. That's what being part of a Thai family means. In August, I got a call from the land office in Udon Thani. The woman on the phone spoke Thai, but I understood enough to know she was asking about property taxes. I told her my wife handled all that. She said she'd tried calling my wife but couldn't reach her. Could I come to the office? There was an overdue payment notice. I went the next day. The woman showed me paperwork. The land I'd bought, our land, Kulap's land, had property taxes that hadn't been paid in 6 months. The amount wasn't huge, 25,000 baht. But the late fees were adding up. If we didn't pay soon, there could be a lien on the property. I was confused. We'd budgeted for property taxes. I'd specifically given Kulap money for that. 80,000 baht, enough to cover 2 years. Where had that money gone? I paid the overdue taxes at the land office. Then I went home and asked Kulup about it. She was apologetic, said she'd forgotten. She'd been busy with her mother's medical issues, and she'd just forgotten to pay. It happened. People forget things. She said she'd be more careful. I accepted that explanation. But something about it bothered me. The land office woman had said they'd been trying to reach Kulap for months. Multiple calls, multiple notices. How do you forget about that? How do you ignore multiple calls from a government office about your property? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about money, about all the transfers I'd made to Kulup's account over the past year and a half. I'd never actually sat down and tallied them up. I just knew we were spending what we needed to spend for the house, for the family, for life. But what was the actual number? I waited until Kulap was asleep. Then I got up and went through my bank records on my laptop. Every transfer to her account, every withdrawal. I made a spreadsheet, organized it by month, by category where I could figure it out. Construction, medical, family emergencies, general living expenses. The number I arrived at was 3,400,000 baht, about 136,000 Australian dollars, in 18 months. On top of the 1 million for the land and the 2 million loan to Somchai, total outflow, 6,400,000 baht, about 256,000 Australian dollars. That's when I started feeling sick. Not because the amount was unreasonable for what we were building. A house, helping family, medical expenses that could easily add up to that much. But because I realized I had no real documentation for most of it, no receipts, no contracts, beyond the original land purchase and the loan to Somchai. Just Kulap's word about where the money had gone. I went back to bed. I didn't say anything. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting my daughter's warnings from 2 years ago poison my mind. Kulup had never given me any reason to distrust her. She'd been a good wife, a loving wife. This was just me being an anxious old man who'd been burned before and was seeing threats where there weren't any. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. In September, I drove out to see Somchai's land, the land I'd funded, just to see how the development was going. I hadn't checked on it in months because I'd been so focused on our house construction. When I got there, the land was empty. Not empty like early-stage development empty. Empty like nothing had happened to it at all. I called Somchai, asked him what was going on. He said there had been permit issues. The shopping center deal had fallen through. The investors had pulled out. The land was just sitting there now. He was trying to find buyers, but the market was slow. He sounded stressed. I felt bad for him. I asked when he thought he could pay back the loan. He said he didn't know. Maybe he'd have to sell the land at a loss just to get some money back. I told him not to rush. That I understood these things take time. I was being supportive. I was being patient. I was being the understanding family member I thought I should be. What I should have been doing was talking to a lawyer. In October 2022, I got a letter in the mail. Official government envelope. Thai language. I had to get it translated. It was from the provincial land office. It was about a mortgage. On the land Kulap and I had bought. Our land. The land where we were building our house. According to the letter, the land had been mortgaged 4 months earlier, June 2022, for 700,000 baht, about 28,000 Australian dollars. The mortgage was now in arrears. The lender was threatening foreclosure. I read that letter 5 times. Then I read the translation again to make sure I'd understood it correctly. Our land had been mortgaged, without my knowledge, for 700,000 baht, and the payments hadn't been made. I remember sitting in my truck in the post office parking lot, holding that letter, and feeling like the entire world had tilted sideways, because I'd given Kulap money every month, plenty of money, enough to cover any expense. Why would she need to mortgage the land? And why hadn't she told me? I drove straight to the house construction site. Kulup was there with Somchai, talking to the workers. When she saw my face, she knew something was wrong. I showed her the letter, asked her to explain. She looked at the letter. Then she looked at Somchai. Then she said something to him in Thai that I didn't catch. Somchai left, just walked away. Kulup asked me to sit down. We sat on a pile of concrete blocks. She told me that yes, she'd mortgaged the land. She'd needed money for her mother's medical expenses. The first surgery hadn't worked. The mother had needed more treatment. It was expensive. She hadn't wanted to worry me. I asked her why she hadn't just asked me for the money. She said she had asked. I'd given her 200,000 baht back in November of the previous year, but it hadn't been enough. The costs kept increasing. She'd needed more but didn't want to burden me because I was already paying for the house construction. I asked her how much more. She said another 500,000 baht, total, about 20,000 Australian dollars. I asked her why she'd only mortgaged the land for 700,000 then. Where was the other 200,000? She said fees. Loan fees, interest. The informal lenders in the village charge high rates. This is the moment in every one of these stories where the protagonist should walk away, should get a lawyer, should protect themselves. But I didn't, because she was crying, because her mother was sick, because I loved her, because I still believed that this was all just a misunderstanding that could be fixed. I paid off the mortgage. 700,000 baht plus penalties, about 30,000 Australian dollars total. I went to the land office with Kulap and paid it in cash. They gave me the discharge papers. The land was free and clear again. Crisis averted. Except it wasn't averted, it was just beginning. That night, back at my rental house, I went through my bank records again, more carefully this time. I looked at every expense Kulap had told me about and tried to match it to actual events I could verify. The mother's surgery, had that actually cost 200,000 baht? The brother's business loan, had that land actually been purchased? The sister's emergency, had that even happened? I started making phone calls. I called the hospital in Bangkok where Kulap said her mother had the surgery. They had no record of anyone by her mother's name being treated there. I asked for the dates Kulap had given me. Nothing. I tried 3 other hospitals. Same result. I drove to the village and talked to a neighbor, an old woman who spoke some English. I asked her about Kulap's mother's health. The woman looked confused, said the mother was fine, had been fine for years, healthy as anyone her age. I went to the land office and asked to see the records for Somchai's land, the land I'd funded. The clerk pulled up the file. The land had been purchased, yes, in July 2021, for 1.2 million baht, not 2 million. And it had been sold in December 2021 for 900,000 baht, a loss to a buyer named Somchai Surin. Same first name as Kulap's brother, but when I looked at the identification number, it was different. This was a different Somchai. I asked the clerk if they could tell me anything about the buyer. She said she couldn't give out that information. I called Somchai, Kulap's brother, asked him about the sale. He said yes, he'd had to sell the land at a loss because of the permit issues. The market had crashed. He'd lost money on it. He felt terrible. He wanted to pay me back, but he didn't have the money right now. I asked him who he'd sold it to. He said some developer from Khon Kaen. He didn't remember the name. Everything had been handled through an agent. I didn't believe him, but I also couldn't prove anything. The land had been purchased. It had been sold. Money had changed hands. Whether I'd been cheated or not, I couldn't definitively say. Maybe there really had been permit issues. Maybe the market really had crashed. Maybe Somchai really had lost money on the deal. Or maybe the whole thing had been a scam from the start and I'd funded the purchase of land that was immediately flipped to a family member at a loss I'd cover. I drove back to my house. Kulap wasn't there. I sat in the dark and tried to think, tried to add it all up, tried to figure out exactly how much money I'd lost versus how much had gone where I'd intended it to go. I couldn't figure it out. The numbers didn't work. Too much was missing. Too many expenses that didn't add up. Too many receipts that didn't exist. Too many stories that didn't match. The next morning, Kulup came to my house with her brother. They sat me down. They told me they needed to explain something. They said the land, our land, the land with the half-built house on it needed to be sold to Somchai to help cover his business debts. The family was in financial trouble. If they didn't do this, the mother would lose her house. The whole family would be destroyed. I asked them what they meant by sold to Somchai. Kulap said the land was in her name, so legally she could sell it to whoever she wanted. But she was selling it to family, so I wouldn't really be losing it. It would still be in the family, We could still build the house. We'd just do it on Somchai's land instead. He'd give us a good price. 500,000 baht. Half of what I'd paid for it, half of what it was worth. I asked her why Somchai would buy land he couldn't afford to pay full price for. She said he had some money from another deal, and the family would help. They'd all contribute. This was the Thai way. Family helping family. I said no. I said absolutely not. That land was our land. Our future. I'd put over 5 million baht into that property. I wasn't selling it for 500,000 to her brother who already owed me 2 million that I was never going to see again. Kulup started crying. Said I didn't understand Thai culture. That I was being selfish. That her family needed help and I was refusing. Somchai didn't say anything. Just sat there looking at the floor. I told them to leave. Kulap said if I didn't agree to the sale, she'd sell it anyway. It was her land. Her name on the title. I couldn't stop her. I told her if she did that, I'd go to the police. She said I could try. But the land was legally hers. I'd given it to her as a gift. A husband to a wife. I had no claim to it. She was right. Under Thai law, I had no claim. The land was hers. I could try to argue that it had been purchased with my money, that there had been an understanding it was for both of us, but that's a civil matter. It would take years in Thai courts. I'd probably lose. And even if I won, by the time I won, the land would be gone. They left. I sat in that house for 3 days, not eating, barely sleeping, trying to figure out what to do. I called my daughter in Australia. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just asked me what I needed. I said I didn't know. She said I should come home. I said I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to fix this. But there was nothing to fix. On the 4th day I got a notification from a lawyer's office. The land had been sold. Kulap had sold it to Somchai for 500,000 baht. Here was my copy of the deed for reference. If I had any questions, I should contact the law office that had handled the transaction. I went to that law office, asked to see the documents. They showed me everything. Legal, proper, Kulap's signature, Somchai's signature. 500,000 baht transferred from his account to hers, all above board. I asked if Kulap had mentioned that her husband had paid for that land. The lawyer said that wasn't relevant. The land was in her name. She was free to sell it. I asked where Somchai had gotten 500,000 baht, if he was supposedly in such financial distress that the family was about to lose everything. The lawyer said that wasn't her concern. Her job was to process the sale. She'd processed it. I found out later that Somchai had mortgaged his other land, different land he'd owned before I ever showed up to buy the land I'd paid for. So he'd gotten my land for half price, and all it cost him was a mortgage on land he already had. Land that might not even really be mortgaged. Land that might be free and clear, and the whole mortgage story was just to explain where the 500,000 came from. I'll never know the truth. I've given up trying to figure it out. The house was never finished. Somchai stopped construction immediately after buying the land, said he couldn't afford to continue. The half-built structure is still sitting there. I drove by it once, about a month after everything collapsed. Somchai had moved a trailer onto the property. He was living there. The house I'd designed, that I'd funded, that I'd spent 8 months watching being built, was just sitting there unfinished while my brother-in-law lived in a trailer on land I'd paid 1 million baht for. I moved out of the rental house in December 2022. Couldn't afford to stay. Couldn't afford anything at that point. I'd spent 820,000 Australian dollars in 2.5 years. Gone. Vanished. I had about 200,000 left. Enough to get home. Enough to start over, maybe, if I was very careful. Kulap messaged me a few times after I left. Said she was sorry. Said she'd been under pressure from her family. Said she still loved me. Said maybe I could come back and we could try again. I blocked her number. I blocked her online. I blocked her on Facebook. I never replied. I'm back in Perth now. I'm 69 years old. I'm living in a studio apartment in Balga. I'm working part-time at Bunnings, which is humiliating, but it pays the bills. My superannuation is gone. My savings are gone. My retirement is gone. I've got enough to live on if I'm very, very careful. If I don't get sick. If nothing unexpected happens. If I live like a monk for the next 15 or 20 years until I die? My kids have been good about it. They haven't said, "I told you so," even though they absolutely told me so. My daughter helped me find the apartment. My sons helped me move what little I'd brought back from Thailand. They check on me regularly. They invite me to Sunday dinners. They include me in the grandkids' lives. I'm grateful for that. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful. People ask me if I'm angry, at Kulup, at Somchai, at Thailand. I'm not angry. I'm too tired to be angry. What would anger accomplish? She's there. I'm here. The money's gone. Being angry won't bring it back. People ask me if I still love her. I don't know how to answer that. I loved who I thought she was. I loved the version of her that I constructed in my head. The woman who'd smiled at me in that restaurant, who'd held my hand when I was emotional, who'd promised me we'd build a life together. That woman doesn't exist. Maybe she never existed. Maybe I invented her because I was lonely, and I wanted to believe that someone young and beautiful could love a 66-year-old man for who he was, rather than what he had. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I think Kulap did care about me in her way. I think she appreciated what I could provide for her family. I think she enjoyed the stability I offered. But love? Real love? The kind that means you don't systematically steal from your husband over 2 years? The kind that means you don't sell land out from under him? I don't think that was ever there. I've learned something about myself through all this. I've learned that I'm a man who desperately wants to be needed, who desperately wants to be useful, who desperately wants to be the hero of his own story. And that desperation made me vulnerable in ways I never anticipated. Because when you want something that badly, when you need to believe something that desperately, you'll ignore evidence that contradicts it, you'll rationalize, you'll explain away, you'll perform mental gymnastics that would win Olympic gold. I was so sure I was different. So sure that I understood Thailand better than those other stupid Farangs who got scammed. So sure that my business experience and my intelligence and my ability to read people would protect me. But none of that mattered. Because at the end of the day, I was still just a lonely old man with money and a Thai woman who understood exactly how to make me feel special. If you're reading this and you're thinking about doing what I did, moving to Thailand, marrying a younger Thai woman, investing money in property you can't legally own, please learn from my mistake. I'm not saying all Thai women are scammers. I'm not saying all these relationships are doomed. Some of them work, some of them are real, but you need to protect yourself. You need to keep control of your finances. You need to maintain access to your own bank accounts. You need to hire independent lawyers for any major transactions. You need to verify everything. Trust, but verify. That's the rule. And if you're already in this situation, if you're already seeing the warning signs, I ignored the mysterious emergencies, the family members who always need money, the expenses that don't quite add up, the property that gets mortgaged without your knowledge. Get out now. I don't care how much you've already invested. I don't care how much it will hurt to walk away. It will hurt more to stay. I promise you that. Because it only gets worse. The lies get bigger. The amounts get larger. And by the time you finally see the truth, it's too late. I'm not going back to Thailand. I'm not going to try to recover the money through Thai courts. I've talked to lawyers. They've told me I have almost no chance of success and it would cost me more than I have left just to try. So I'm letting it go. I'm accepting that $820,000 is the price I paid for believing I could buy love, for believing I could buy family, for believing that being generous and kind and trusting would protect me from being hurt. The land is still there. The house is still half finished. Somchai is probably still living in that trailer. Kulap is probably already with someone new. Some other lonely Farang with money who thinks he's different, who thinks he's smarter than the others, who thinks Thai love is real love as long as you're respectful and generous and willing to embrace the culture. I hope he's luckier than I was. I hope his story ends differently, but I doubt it will. Because the rules aren't different in Thailand. They're exactly the same. Money attracts predators. Loneliness attracts manipulation. Vulnerability attracts exploitation. It doesn't matter what country you're in. It doesn't matter how much you think you understand the culture. If you're a mark, you're a mark. And I was the perfect mark. Wealthy, lonely, arrogant enough to think I was too smart to be fooled. I wasn't too smart. I was just another old fool with money. And now I'm an old fool without money. That's my story. That's my warning. I hope someone reads this and makes a different choice than I did. Because I can't get my money back. I can't get those years back. But maybe I can save someone else from making the same mistake. That's all that's left now. That and a studio apartment in Balga and a part-time job at Bunnings and the knowledge that I destroyed my own retirement because I wanted to believe in something beautiful that was never real. The land was perfect, the deal was perfect, and it was all a lie.